Hi everyone, good afternoon. Please, if you can hear me, kindly indicate in the comment section. Hi Chisom, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes. Yeah, I was trying to figure out the presentation from here. So, participants, please, if you can hear me, indicate in the comment section so that I'm sure we are ready here. Okay, a minute. Let me check this. Okay, so we will have to start now. While we expect more people to join. Okay, I can see their comments. Okay, so already we have with us the facilitator for today in the person of Cynthia Chisom. Chisom is the VP. Is a VP at Spark Venture Labs and is a startup advisor across global incubators and accelerators like Talemia, Co-Creation Hub, VC for Africa, Fuel Africa, GCIP Accelerator. She's passionate about supporting early stage startups in the African ecosystem. She holds an MSc degree in entrepreneurship, innovation, and management from Imperial Business School, London. She was recently recognized by Leading Ladies Africa as one of the 100 most inspiring women in Nigeria and Ventures Park as one of the 50 women leaders doing incredible things in the technology and innovation space. Welcome to the stage, Cynthia Chisom.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Uh so I'm guessing you can hear me. Pascal, could you help me with there's this button at the right hand corner, the bottom right hand corner that expands the view of the slides. Could you just help me click on it so that it becomes bigger? We're able to capture everything. But yeah, welcome everybody to this class. Honestly, when it comes to the success of any startup, over and over again, we've seen that it's literally hinged on how well the founder is able to design the business model. And so I see this particular class as a very important class, a very critical class to the success of your startup, right? So I want you to take every single element of this session seriously, pen down some of the thoughts that go through your mind. When there's an opportunity to ask, to take questions, make sure you share your questions. My goal is to get you from being, you know, someone who has very little knowledge about business model design to someone who's actually, designing business models, effectively across board. So, next slide, please. So, um, like Pascal has mentioned, the work that I do in the ecosystem. But if we were to summarize it into a sentence, it's basically supporting founders through startup education. So I have seen the gap, especially when I took out time to take a degree on entrepreneurship, innovation, and management at one of the best universities in the world. I saw that that there is this gap when it comes to startup education on the continent. We have a lot of, copy and paste imported ideas, and there's really none tailored to the ecosystem. This has led me to launch a podcast called Startup Stories with Cynthia, focused on sharing the stories of early stage founders. It also led me to starting a startup school focused on helping the pre-seed, like really, really early aspiring founders and first time founders, as well as a lot of other things. My goal is to make sure that every founder that comes in contact with me is able to gain clarity and understanding as to what to do when just starting out. So that's the way you summarize my work in the ecosystem. Next slide. Next slide. All right. So when it comes to the business model, right, there are a couple of things that come up before you start talking about business model. So I'm guessing you have gone through different classes addressing these things, and it's really one: what's the problem you're trying to solve? How big of a problem is that? Which is the problem discovery phase. Customer discovery, solution discovery, customer discovery as well. Then also finding if there's a fit between the problem and the customer, and then the problem and the solution, right? So before you get to the question or the conversation of business model, you need to make sure that you have those layers identified. And you will see why in the next slide. Next slide. So this is a framework I designed to help any African startup founder sort of understand like the steps you need to take to find product market fit, because product market fit is a signal of success or failure in any startup. So what are the steps you need to take? Because everybody says get product market fit, but for you to get product market fit, you need to make sure that you have a list of steps that you need to take. And that's the essence of this framework. It's just one part of a 3-part framework that addresses the journey, the entire journey of a startup founder, right? So the first part at the top, you see the customer discovery. Then once you're done with that, you go on to the problem discovery. So in each box, there are tools and steps, frameworks that you use, decisions you need to make, insights you're trying to collect. But then you see that before you get to product market fit, there is the business model fit. And that's to show you that, before you can find PMF, you need to make sure that you have gotten BMF, right? Which is making sure that the business model works. But there's something I've seen in the ecosystem. Next slide. Which is a lot of copy and paste. So let's look at these two companies, for example. The first one is Fuzzy, and the second one is Evet. How many of you are familiar with, any of these two companies? I don't know if there's a way I can see the replies, but I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Evet or Fuzzy company. I mean, they're based in the US, so you probably have maybe very little information about them. But let me just give you a bit of background. So Evet was founded in 2018, and their goal was to alleviate the growing pains that basically there was basically vet shortage, right? So people who need vets are way more than the supply of veterinarians, right? And so they were trying to find a way to solve the problem of access to vets. Basically access to vets. So Fuzzy was actually the first to get to market. So they were in the market before AirVet, right? And on the standard of what's successful in the ecosystem, basically what's common, basically fundraising. People see fundraising as a signal of success, but it's not necessarily so, right? It's not even so, right? Signal of success in maybe in the terms of like VC world, because that's what's important to them. But in terms of the sustainability of your business, fundraising is not exactly like a major signal for success, because there are many companies that have raised a lot of money. As a matter of fact, according to the recent statistics, 42% of the people who raised above $10 million actually failed in this past 2-3 years of the economic downturn. So it's not about the money you raise. So in the case of Fuzzy, they raised $80.5 million, right, from several investors. Their goal was to provide 247 live chats and telehealth for about $15 per month. So it not even just the telehealth. That means people who need that kind of support can now, reach out, um, to the platform and get access to the vets and things like that. But in addition to that, they also did some drug delivery, some items. They had like a marketplace. There was educational content. There were programs for nutrition, for training, for obedience, a lot of things. I mean, they had a lot of partnerships. So those companies where you see they are doing big stuff. But at the end of the day, one of the major comments from one of the employees and even across board was that the reason why they failed, because at the end of the day, they failed, right? The reason why they failed because their business model was not economically viable. The company could not scale. And, even after they shut down, they were still owing hundreds of thousands and even millions to creditors, to vendors, to employees, right? It was such a very big wreck. And so Evet, seeing that failure, decided to do things differently. They decided to come from the other angle. So Fuzzy came from the B2C angle, which is going directly to the people who need vets, right? That's demand, basically large customer base, trying to acquire customers. But they went through the other angle of saying, okay, I understand that employees work at companies, and companies are looking for ways to give employee benefits to their employees. And one of the things we see with what's coming in America, people are beginning to get pets, right, at their office, and they are always in need of that kind of support, right, while they're at the office. And companies are looking to provide employee benefits. So they came from that angle of saying, we come to you companies to make available employee benefits, which is basically to the employees who have pets. They get access to the same services that Fuzzy was making available, but this time around was a different business model. This was more stable because you're working with companies, you're going to get your pay ahead of time. You're going to have access to a lot of customers, because now with 10 customers in quote, with 10 companies, you can reach about 5,000, 10,000 people. Cost of acquisition low, right? So they were able to solve the same problem, still servicing the same customer that Fuzzy was, although adding another customer segment to it. But the difference was in the business model, and that's why they're still thriving to now. So I've given you these two companies to understand that it's not about the solution you have. It is not about the problem you're trying to solve. It is beyond that. You need to find a way to make sure that your business model works. So I've said business model a couple of times, and I'm sure you're wondering what a business model is. For those who are, it is simply trying to understand how you make money, right? Revenue is such a very big signal for a success or the failure of any company. The reason why Fuzzy fell was because they were not generating enough revenue. So you might say, but they raise money. How come they still? That's the way it works. Even though you raise a lot of money, you can't keep that business alive for so long with if there's no money involved. So you might give the example of Uber. Uber is an exception to the case because they have access to large, like, cash. They had access to external investors. Many of the African founders may not have that opportunity to have a lot of investors willing to do a follow-on. So how do you build a business when your business model in itself is not viable? And then even at that, on the table, there's always this conversation of path to profitability. At a point, it's going to be a conversation in the board where they're like, okay, how are you guys making money? Where do we see this going forward? Because even if you want to do an acquisition, or you're going to get to a point of an IPO, even if you're not going to go through the route of VC funding, but you just want to build a business, you cannot build a business if the business model doesn't work. Next slide. So what is a business model? It's very simple. How are you going to make money? How are you going to make money? And it's not just how are you going to make money, how are you going to make money profitably? Because you wouldn't say that Fuzzy was not making money. Fuzzy was making money. They were making money, but they were not making enough money to keep the business alive. So what is your plan for making money for this business, for this solution, for this problem, beyond the amazing features that you think your solution has? If there is no business model, it will not work. Next slide, please. So one of the things that I want you to remember is that your business model is looking at both the revenue and it's also looking at the cost as well. So before I go on, there's this thing that I've seen in the ecosystem where there's a lot of, posts and articles around, oh, these are the different types of business models that exist. There are this, if I ask you, I'm sure you'll be able to mention a couple based on what's popular: subscription model, freemium model, and things like that. But one of the things I want you to recognize is that when those models were being created at that time, there was no name for it. Instead, it was based on specific metrics that made the founder at that time to develop this system for generating money for their startup. So what I want to do in this class is to move you from just trying to copy and paste business models on your business, is to actually get you to the point where you are able to design what works for your customer and what works for the solution and for the geographical location and for all the different areas you need to look out for. Because if you try to copy and paste, what will happen is that it would not work. It will not stick because it will not work for the people that you want to serve. So let's go through some common ones, for the sake of those who are not familiar with the common ones. The first one we have is the freemium business model, which is very popular. You give something for free, and then later on you begin to charge for upgrades. You have the example of Slack, Drive. If I ask you, I'm sure you're going to name a couple more. Next slide. You also have subscription. Everybody's very familiar with it. You subscribe monthly for the service, right? Next slide. You have the marketplace, right? Marketplace basically providing a platform for people to sell. Amazon is a very good example. Next slide. You also have the aggregator, right? Very different from the marketplace. In the aggregator model, the people who are coming to use the platform have to use the brand name of the platform. As opposed to Amazon and Fiverr, you can come in with your name, people will just purchase you for, it's you, your identity. But for Uber, you don't go to Uber meeting Musa and seeing Musa and co companies. No, you see Uber, right? Whoever it is still under the name. Same thing with Airbnb. It's an Airbnb, right? So that's the difference. And then, you need to understand why, what will work for, each category. We'll get to that very soon. Then, because you'll be wondering, why didn't Uber use the platform model? Why use the aggregator? Why did Amazon also not use the other model? You will be able to define what works in each scenario. Then there is the pay as you go. The more you use, the more you pay. Next slide. You have fee for a service, right? We provide a service, we get a fee, transaction fee, usually in the fintech space. Next slide. Next slide. Sorry, can you hear me? Okay, great. All right, so ad-based business models, very, very similar. Google and Meta, basically providing a platform. People populate the platform with user-generated content, and they make that data available to the people who want to reach out to those users. So, two sides, right? Next slide. You have transaction. Basically, you provide the product or the service, and you get a one-time transaction fee, right? Pretty simple. Basically, products that you sell on the market. Next slide. So, like I said, copying and pasting doesn't work. What I want you to do in this class is to learn how to design business models that are unique to the problem or the customer you're trying to serve. Next slide. Next slide. All right, so how do you go about designing business model? First thing I want you to understand is that when it comes to business model, you need to understand the concept of value exchange. Whatever it is you're doing, it's all about the value that each stakeholder is bringing to the table. It's all about the value. So everybody is talking to each other, but they are going to stay in that relationship when there is value exchange. Next slide. So now that I've cleared that up, here are the 5 things you need to think about when designing business models. So you want to design a business model for the problem or the solution you presented. These are the 5 key areas you need to look out for. First area is, who are the stakeholders? That's what you want to start from. You want to start from who are the stakeholders. Then you now go on to what is value to the stakeholders. Remember, I mentioned this value exchange. So who are the people that are going to be talking and what are they going to be exchanging in terms of value? Next is, how do you deliver value to the stakeholder? And then fourth is, what will be the cost to deliver value to the stakeholder? And finally, how would you capture the value? So you see, what is value to the customer? What will it cost to deliver the value? How will you capture it? What's the best way to deliver it? These are the 5 key areas that you need to, the 5 quick questions you need to answer to properly design a business model that works. So next slide. Can you go back? So we're going to do a little practical. We're going to take Uber as an example, but we're also going to do some other practical parts. So we'll take each question one after the other, and we're going to look at it together. So for Uber, right? For Uber, who are the stakeholders of Uber? I don't know if there's a way for me to see. Please, can you go back? Please go back. Yeah, please go back. Is there a way for me to see the comments of the students in the room? Who are the stakeholders of Uber?
Guys, you can send your response on the comment section, and I'll post it.
So just want to get feedback from you all. Who are the stakeholders of Uber? So stakeholders, so like I said, when designing the business model, before you get to the business model conversation, you need to address problem discovery, customer discovery. So in this case for Uber, it's like, who are the people who are going to be leveraging the value that Uber has to offer? Who are the people that are currently being served by Uber? Because Uber is an existing company, so we can use that. So not necessarily the CEO or the board of directors. Stakeholders are the people that Uber consistently delivers value to and receives value from. So value exchange, keep that in mind. Value exchange. Okay. So Haruna says VCs, aggregators. So VCs. So now that I've explained the context, I'm sure you already understand that VC cannot, be one of the stakeholders, because Uber is not necessarily exchanging value for VCs. VCs are like one of the investors, right? In this case, right? So they're not the people that Uber is trying to serve. Okay. But yes, you're right on drivers and the users. You're right. So next slide, please. So you see from this chart, which is more or less called the value exchange chart, you can see the different stakeholders that Uber is constantly interacting with in terms of providing value, right? You would see the driver at the top. You will see the user at the bottom, just like Haruna said. Then you also see the government, because yes, the Uber provides value to the government. Very soon we're going to see what that means, right? And then you see at the bottom that Uber also provides third parties, right, with data of the transactions and the activities that goes on the platform. So this is how you need to think about your stakeholders. So you ask yourself this problem. I mean, at this point, you should know the problem you're trying to solve and the people you're trying to serve. You just make a list of who they are, right? If you are a platform, you're trying to connect 2 stakeholders together, you definitely mention the first stakeholder and the second stakeholder. So those are the stakeholders. They are very important. And the reason why I did not call them users is because they are not just people, they are stakeholders who have, who are contributing value to you. Because if Uber severes the tide between the organization and the government, there's a very high chance that they will not exist on those platforms. So there's exchange going on there. You're providing value, and so you need to think about those people, because then you can begin to understand how you capture value, how you deliver value, and things like that. So that's what you want to think around, about who are the stakeholders of your platform or of this problem you're trying to solve. So now that we have that cleared out, let's start with one of the stakeholders, because every stakeholder is different. Let's start with the user, the customer, right, of Uber. Please, can you go back? Please, can you go back? Who are the So who are the stakeholders of Uber? We mentioned that, right? So what is value? What is value? Next slide, please.
Hello, can you hear me? Chisom? Hello? Hello, Chisom, can you hear me?
What is value to the user? So for you to be able to,
Chisom, your voice is breaking. Oh.
can anybody hear me?
I think your network is disturbing. We can't hear you.
Can you hear me better now?
Yes, yes, can hear you now.
Can you hear me better now?
Yes, much better. If you can hear her, please indicate. Oh. I think there's a sound
Okay, so you can
from
hear me
the
properly,
mic.
right?
There is a sound from the mic.
Yeah, there's sound from the mic. What about now?
It's disturbing
Is the
your
sound gone?
voice. The mic. So hi everyone. Please, if you have questions concerning the session, you can start dropping your questions. For the person asking for attendance, the attendance will be posted at the middle of the session.
Okay, so I'm back now. I'm back. Can you guys hear me properly?
Yes, I can hear you. Guys, if you can hear her, indicate in the comment section, please.
Okay. All right, perfect. So the next, remember I said there are 5 questions you need to answer when designing your business model. 5 questions, 5 areas you need to look at, right? First is, who are the stakeholders, which we have already probably talked about using the example of Uber. So it's basically defining the people that you're going to be having interactions with and exchanging value with, right? So obviously, for the case of Uber's journey, the area of the government and the third parties came up as they moved along in their startup journey, right? And the only two stakeholders that they could think of or see at that point was the driver and the user. So it's the same thing for you, right? Maybe at the moment, the government conversation may not be in the picture, or one stakeholder or the other may not be in the picture. But as you go on, you probably have to consider them because there's some form of value exchange going on there, right? But think about the primary customer that you are trying to serve. That's where you want to start from. If you're a platform, a marketplace, think about all the people that are going to be using that marketplace or be getting value from that marketplace. You need to think about those areas, which we'll get to very soon. So what is value to the stakeholders? So we're going to use the Uber situation, right? And we're going to start with the first thing that you need to look at. So when trying to understand what is value to the users, you need to look at 3 major areas. You need to look at the pain, you need to look at the goal, and you need to look at the gains, right? I'll take that again. The pain, the goals, and the gains. So in the case of Uber, what you're basically trying to answer is, what prevents the user from achieving the goal of easy transportation? Because the goal really is to get easy transportation, which is the major issue that Uber was trying to address at this time. In when Travis was in New York just starting out, getting a cab was a very big issue. And so the major goal is somebody wants to get from point A to point B, right? We're going to get to the goals very soon. But then what's currently preventing that person from getting access to easy transportation? Because that's what Uber is trying to do, right? So first thing you are seeing there is the issue that they have is the paying hassle. Having to, bargain with change, even in your normal context in Africa, right? Having to bargain change, that transaction issue. Second level is the difficulty to find a ride that you actually want. For those who are in locations where you have to stand at the bus stop, before the days of Uber, it was a big issue. Even if you have to flag down a cab, you probably have to wait for some time before you find a cab that would want to go in your direction. Then having to now explain to the driver, where you want to go to was also another issue. Unfriendly service, because the drivers, can decide to treat you anyhow, which is a big issue for the people at that time when Uber was just starting. Then they had public transport, but it was slow. Many stops along the way. You end up getting to your destination very late, which is now the late arrival part. And then there's the issue of language problems, right? Even in the context of the African continent, you still have that happening. So these were the different pain points that Uber had to sort of come to terms with. That these are the issues that are stopping the user from getting that goal of easy transportation. So the next thing you're looking at now is the goal. What exactly is the goal? What personal transport related needs does the user have? That's what you're trying to answer. So in your case, depending on the context of what you're building, what is the major need? What's the major goal that they're trying to achieve? So for the case of the personal transport space, which is where Uber was trying to, disrupt, was getting from point A to point B. It's simple. Like, it's not about all the amazing other things that you can do on the platform. The major thing that they wanted to get done is, I just want to get from point A to point B. That's the most important thing. So you need to be able to drive down to the root, problem, like the real issue at hand. Forget all the other amazing features that you have. What is the most important goal of this user? Like, even if all other things are not there, if this is not there, they're not going to be on your platform. Because the reason why they're coming there is because they're coming to address an issue. I want to get from point A to point B. So you can give them fantastic features of, being able to pay, rating is amazing, but they can't get from point A to point B. Then you do not have a user. You do not have a customer. So they just want to find a ride or hail a ride and get there in time. That's it. If we were to summarize all their pain problems, the major goal is I want to get from this point to this point on time. So what are the gains? So when you're looking at gains, you're looking at, okay, extra benefits. So you're asking the user, okay, so let's say we take you from point A to point B. What other things would you love to experience? You know, in addition to just getting from point A, what other things would you be interested in? Right? So at this point, you're having conversations with the user. So I'm guessing you've gone through the whole customer research phase. So you're very well prepared for this part. And so they begin to tell you, oh, I want to be able to keep track of the cost, as I'm using this, solution. I want to be able to keep track of the cost, I want to know where my ride is while I'm waiting for the ride to come up to me. I want to be able to know the ride in advance. I want to be able to know my ETA when I'll get to the destination, because I want to get there on time. I want to be able to plan my day. I want to be able to give feedback, especially for the unfriendly services that I've received in the past with those public transport guys. I want to be able to share the details with my close ones, my friends, my family, so that they can know where I am and security can be maintained. I want to be able to keep track of my past records. So they begin to share with you the gains, other things that they will love. Don't forget, don't be distracted by these other things, because what I see founders doing is that they go on building other things, trying to address other things. For your PMF stage, for this stage, when you're trying to get to PMF, your goal is to get the MVP. And MVP is most viable, minimum viable product, right? So what you're doing there is trying to get to the root problem you're trying to solve, and focusing hard on that, right? So in the case of Uber, when you first started, there was no fancy app. He didn't start with this fancy app. He started with just having the contact of a black service provider, making it available to his friends and family, and then he built on that and built on that to what it is today. But what I see founders doing is they're trying to make that perfect platform, as their MVP. That is not your MVP. So to bring it back into the context of what we're talking about in business model, which is critical for finding PMF, you need to focus on the real goal. The extra benefits are good, and you can even bring them up later on in your journey, but get to the real pain problem that they're having. So that's how to know what is value to the customer. Because whatever you're doing on that platform, if you're unable to hit the nail on the head, you have lost that user. Get out of your head, get out of your space, get out of the fancy, castle you have built about what your products can do and where it's going to be and all of that. Be more focused on the customer and what is important to them. And that's why by understanding the pain, the gains, and the goals of the stakeholder will actually help you truly answer the question of what is value to the stakeholder. So in the case of Uber, what is truly value to them is I want to be able to get from point A to point B on time, because my current experience with these personal transport options that I have is really bad, and I've shared it with you already. So whatever you're doing, make sure I can get to my destination on time. All right. So now that we've addressed the case of what is value to the stakeholder, the next thing you want to look at is how do you deliver value, right? How do you deliver value? Because no matter, which approach, no matter the kind of direction you want to take, it is important to really think about delivering value effectively. And when you're thinking about delivering value, you want to make sure that your product or service is available when and where the customer wants it, and that they're able to use it and enjoy it easily. That is the goal of how to deliver value. So deliver value, bring the value to the customer. So now you know what's important to them. Now how do you bring it to them? Because that determines the entire business model. To be honest, it does. It really does. So there are two things you want to keep in mind when you are at this place trying to determine how to deliver value. The first one is the solution experience. The solution experience. And when I say solution experience, I'm not talking about how the app will work. There's a big difference. Remember, you are focused on giving value to these customers, right? Not presenting an app. I'm really making this huge difference because I have been in this ecosystem long enough to know what founders are obsessed with. They're obsessed with how fancy looking that technology is. And so they spend 1 year, 2 years trying to build this beautiful looking app but with nobody interacting or even generating value from it. So for the solution experience, your focus is on the solution. Basically asking what are the different steps that the customer will have to take to get value. So in the case of Uber, she or she has communicated that she wants to be able to get to point A to point B. So you could start with the customer should be able to find the options that she wants based on her preference, and then she should probably be able to exchange contact. There has to be, collect the contact of the person or reach out to the person. There has to be that communication between those two people, right? And they have to meet each other, and the customer should be able to pay and share her review. So these are the different steps. This step can be executed with and without an app. As a matter of fact, when Travis started, it was done without the app. It started without the app. So all he did was get the contact of the person, get the contact of the back service and make that connection happen. At this point, let me just share the story of a startup founder in India. They are called Stamp Plus. It's an Indian ambulance company. When the two founders started, they did their degree at INSEAD Business School. And one of the major things that they had to do to graduate was embark on a project. So they embarked on this project to, their goal was to find a problem, solve it, generate revenue, basically build out something, right? It's part of entrepreneurship. So both of them had the similar experience of, getting access to emergency care, like in India. They're both from India. So one of the founders was from his personal experience of his father, and the other one was from his friend. So it was a big issue. So they said to themselves, let us build an Uber for ambulances. Basically, if you want to get an ambulance, just use, just where you can order for a cab, just order for this ambulance, and then you get your ambulance. Pretty simple, right? People need access to ambulance. How about we make access to ambulance for them using this app? So it was so simple and so good that they actually won the competition, and they got 20,000 euros to actually do this. So with that excitement, they reached out to an Indian company, outsourced the production of the platform. The entire 20,000 euros went into building the app, and they carried their bags and went to India to, implement this, because they found like they got jackpot, right? So meanwhile, they've been going back and forth to India during the process when they were doing their research, but they did not do in-depth research. So when it was time for them to get it, they got into the market and realized that after weeks and months of trying to convince the people to actually use the platform, there was no transaction. Basically, nobody was using it. I mean, it's a beautiful looking app. It's pretty simple. Why is nobody using it? So in the process, they saw a major gap. And what was the gap? First issue they saw was that ambulances in India are not regulated. Anybody can just pick up a Toyota Hertos, paint it red, and call that an ambulance, put some mics, where it's supposed to be, and call that. Some of them will not even put any siren anywhere, and call that an ambulance. That was number one. Number two is the drivers who have those ambulances use feature phones. They don't use Android phones. That was another big issue. So one after the other, they realized how big of a mess they're in. They spent the entire money. They're stranded in quotes in India trying to build something that's not working. And then one day they encountered this guy, who they learned that he was solving this problem. So they were curious to know. So the guy took them to his home, and they got into his home and saw that he was living in a very small room, and all he had was a table and a chair in that room. And on that table, there's a notebook in the middle, one phone on the left-hand side, and another phone on the right-hand side. And so what will happen is that someone who is in need of an ambulance will call him on the right-hand side, he will pick up the call, get the details, reach out to his left-hand side, which is where the other phone is, reach out to the driver, make that match, and they write it in his notebook. And he was doing that effectively. When they saw that, they literally just, collapsed to the floor, because you can imagine the stress and the pain they'd been through, seeing that this guy was literally doing the same thing, no app, but it was working. He was making money. The business was viable. And so they came in, to the situation and, strike a partnership, put some, try to, put a structure, using Excel sheet and all of that, but they ended up using that model for a long period of time before even bringing anything called any app, because you need to understand the context. So I'm saying that because I do not want you to fall into the trap of thinking that this solution experience I'm referring to has to do with the app. No, it has to do with how will the customer move from where she is, which is in pain, to where she needs to be, which is her goal achieved. So those steps, that high level step is what you're really looking out for. And I really do hope you got that. I really do hope you got that. So there's a story, a podcast episode. The founder of Nearpays, his story is quite similar to the Indian guy, but there's a twist to what happened. He actually spent 6 to 8 million. He lost 6 to 8 million trying to build the platform, and ended up failing and had to change. So I recommend that you actually go listen to that. I think that should be season 4. I think it's season 4 or season 5. So just listen to the podcast, Startup Stories with Cynthia, on any of the podcast platforms, and you get to listen to these people tell their stories live and direct, so you can know the mistakes to avoid. So once you have done the solution experience, the next thing you want to look at is the people and the partners required to deliver the value. So who do you need on your table to actually deliver value to this user? Who are the different stakeholders? So would you need a logistic partner for you to deliver value? Would you need an extra stakeholder for you to get the data you need to provide that value? So that's what's the partner part, because what you're trying to do is, okay, this is how I'm going to deliver the value to the people, and these are the people I need to actually deliver value to the user. So you pen that down, right? You pen that down. By the time we get into it, you'll be able to make the connections. So I just want to get feedback. You guys can still hear me. Pascal, you can still hear me, right? Pascal, can you still hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, perfect. So we've answered the third question of how do you deliver value to the stakeholders, right? The next question you want to answer is, what will it cost to deliver value to the stakeholders? What will it cost? And so what you're doing is you're trying to identify the cost sources. So you opened up, okay, this is the solution experience. So in that solution experience, there's an exchange, or there's a movement from one point to another point. So before one phase, gets to the next phase, before you get to the next phase, where are the cost sources? Where is the cost coming from? What are you going to be spending on, both in internal dependencies and external dependencies? So if you're going to be taking on a logistic firm, it means that you're going to be spending on that logistic relationship. You need to understand it. It's all part of the business model. You don't just look at, how we're going to make money. Also look at how we're also going to spend money in the process of making money, right? So there are many people and many founders, like I've said, who, they launch without thinking deeply about business model fit, about the pricing strategy, about the cost structure associated with the business model, how you would acquire the customer, where is the customer, and even just simple, proper bookkeeping. And guess what? These are the things that actually sink a startup. So when you're looking at costs, there are a couple of costs that I want you to keep in mind. There's the concept of unit economics. I did a full article on it. You can check my website, cynthiaichison.com. Just go to the Startup Insights tab. You see the newsletter. So I did a whole newsletter explaining how, to think about unit economics in the most basic form therein. I'll not have the time to go deeply into it, but I'll just do an overview, right? I recommend that article for you to get more answers, right? So, when you're thinking about unit economics, it's so important because they actually help you understand how much value to create and how much value to capture per unit. So you're not just looking at it, holistically, you're looking at it per unit customer. And this is important because some people think that, we're making 50 million naira, or we're making $5 million a month, monthly revenue, recurring revenue. But it cost us 20 million naira to just get that 25 million naira. That's not a business. That's not a proper sustainable business. That's not. Because that's the reason why many people fail, even after raising. Because obviously, for you to be able to meet up with the $20 million expense or 20 million naira expense, it means that you are taking money from external parties to support the business. Because how would you spend what you don't have, right? So you're getting from external parties so that you can. But at the point, it's all not going to make sense. That's one of the reasons why a lot of these companies have died out, because there's going to be that conversation on the table. So you want to go for a positive unit economics because it indicates that the customers are willing to pay more than it costs to actually serve them. I'll take that again. You want to go for positive unit economics because what it's indicating is that people are willing to pay more than it costs to actually deliver value. Remember, we talked about delivering value. So, right? So, cost is important. Cost is important. You want to go for positive unit economy because it even reviews that, you know, the value proposition makes sense to them and it's viable and you can scale it. Because if your unit economics is scalable, it means that, you know, you can increase revenue faster than the cost as you grow your customer base. And guess what? It's a signal for a strong competitive advantage. So your unit economics is critical, and you have to start thinking about it from day one. In short, from day zero. No. From day -1. You need to think about how will you make money, and in thinking about how you make money, look at how you're going to spend. What's the unit economics? What's the unit economics? I'm sure you've heard of things like CAC and the rest. These are all part of the unit economics. So there are 4 concepts I want you to keep in mind when thinking about, you know, maybe 3. I'll just give you 3. There are a couple more, but you can just take these 3 for now. First concept is CAC, CAC, right? It's a metric under unit economics to look at, right? And it's the average expense of gaining a single customer. The average expense. So basically, if it costs you $5,000, right, to get 500 customers, it means you're spending how much? 5,000 divided by 500. Anybody? I mean, anybody? 5,000 divided by 500. I don't know. I can't see the answers. But yeah, that's about $10, right? So it costs you $10 to get one customer, right? It costs you $10 to get one customer. So you need to be able to know what that is. So cost of acquisition is really looking at your marketing costs. It's not looking at the entire cost. We're going to get to that. But primarily, how much money would you need to spend to get just one customer? How much will you need to get? So how do you do that, especially for, you know, a space where you are probably not launched, obviously. You look at what's already obtainable in the market. We're going to get to that pretty soon. How to, you know, look at the different metrics, right? You look at what's obtainable in the market right now, right? You look at the industry that you are in, you know, how easy it is to be able to get, you know, to those particular people. There are some customer segments where it actually takes a lot for you to convince them to come on board because of, you know, let me not go ahead of we're going to get to that. Right? So customer acquisition is really important to look out for. Another metric you want to look out for is the lifetime value, LTV. And that's really looking at the revenue that you gain from a single customer over the duration of that person, you know, being with you, or duration of their account. So it takes you $10 to get one customer, but the customer is only able to, you know, give value to you what, you know, maybe worth $50, right? But let's say if now you spend $10 to get them, but you're only generating value of $5. That's not good. That's a negative unit economics, right? So lifetime value is like how long it takes for that person. So which is one of the reasons why subscription model tends to like thrive a lot, because it costs you probably $100 to be able to get that customer, but that customer is stuck with you for the next 5 years, paying $10 every month. So the lifetime value is $10 every month times 5 years, right? So that's about $120 in a year times 5 years, that's about $600. So you're getting you're spending $100, but you're getting $600. So that's why people go for subscription model, because it's all part of the cost, looking at the cost and the lifetime value of that user. I'll give an example of a company called Ring, security camera, right? I'll try and wrap up because we've got very little time. So this product is security cameras. When they first started by releasing the cameras, at a fee. You just buy the cameras, you install it. But over time, it's like you just have the customer one time. That's it. Like there's no way to keep, the revenue flowing in. So they had to bring these all up elements when they saw that customers were looking for more value. They want to be able to see the people, talk to them, have more extra benefits. I want to be able to interact with those people that come to my door. I want to be able to talk to them even if I'm in London or in the US. Adding all those extra benefits. Remember those extra benefits? Yeah. So they now made those extra benefits available to the user on a subscription basis. So you pay if you want to get more than what you would usually get when you buy. So you pay that fee first to get the security camera, then you now still pay subscription to get access to more features on the platform. So that's how they're able to not only generate their one-time fee, but also generate revenue subscription too. Business model, right? So I think the last one I'll just stop here is the lifetime value to CAC ratio. So it is ideal that the ratio between your CAC and your lifetime value is 3-to-1. So that means you should be able to, when you're designing your business model, you should be able to make 3 times how much you make. How much it costs you to get that customer. 3 times. So it costs you $5. You should be able to do $15. Like you're able to get $15 back within the time frame of that user, right? And more, right? If it's 1-to-1, it's basic. It's like there's nothing on top. Like it's just there, right? You want to go for 2, 3, and above, right? That's what you want to go for. So let me wrap up. The final question that you're trying to answer is, how do you capture the value? How do you capture the value back from the customer, right? And what you're really doing is looking at your revenue streams. Like the different sources of revenue, and even the pricing, even down to the pricing, because you might be in the same market solving the same problem, but your pricing targets 2 different customer segments. And that pricing also affects the cost of delivery, because the people at the higher level want more. People are willing to pay more, they want more. And so that would also define the cost you need to put into place and how you even deliver value to them, because the way you deliver value to the people at the lower level in terms of price will be very different. Very, very different. So the reason why I say you should think of value first and not just the money or the price point is because customers see value beyond price. I'll close with, I cannot close yet. Okay. I'll close this particular part of the conversation with a story of Unilever. So Unilever has one of the products that Unilever has is the tea product, the tea bags, right? They're in the UK market selling tea bags. And one thing you know about tea bags, if you go to the tea bag section of any supermarket, you see it's crowded. There's a lot of options. And so that's what's happening to them. So over time, they were now, competing based on price. This person will reduce the price and then another person will reduce the price. Customers are now choosing based on price because, everybody's the same. So I'll go for the cheapest. It's just natural instincts, right? And so they were trying to come out of that space, like trying to stand out. And one of the things they did was to change their strategy. They interacted with the users of, the customers of, this product and try to understand what extra benefits, what are things, what are the things that are very important to you. Realize that, climate change was important to them. Social impact was important to them. So they decided to blow up that part of their world because it existed, but it's just that they didn't talk about it as much or put it into the entire business model. And so looking at their journey of the tea bag, it actually comes from, Rwanda, right? Where the tea leaves are being processed and all of that. And they now started telling that in their story and infusing that into their packaging and talking about in their product. And guess what? They increased the prices. And guess what? They made more money in that period. They didn't have to reduce the prices. Why? Because value is what customers are looking for. What are you bringing to the table that other people are not? What is value? That's why I'm talking about that. So don't just think about the number of features that you want to release. It's not about the features. It's not about the features, it's about the value. It's about the value. Make sure you communicate value to your users. So as we wrap up, let's go back a few slides below. Let's go back, 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 back. Yes. So, okay, let's go to the previous slide. Let me see previous slide. Okay, so next slide, next slide. So now, what are the things you need to think about when capturing value? What are the things you need to think about? Next slide. What are the things you need to think about? First thing you need to think about is it a priority to these people? Because yes, it's a pain problem, but it's not the number one pain problem in the journey. I remember, founder coming to meet me, trying to solve a problem in the podcast space because I'm into podcasts, wanted to, see, you need to do customer service properly. You need to do your customer research properly because you can just get the wrong answer. Even though they ask you, have you spoken to customers? You say, yes, I've spoken to them. But what you said to them in that process determines the outcome you get. So yes, he presented to me what his solution was. Red flag number one. Then I said, okay, yes, it's a problem for me, but it's not my number one problem. My number one problem is getting the content out. But at the end of the day, I told him I'm not the person you're trying to serve. You're probably trying to serve somebody else who has addressed the first two layers of the podcast journey, and then is now looking to address the third layer. If you're going to market this to me, I will not actually buy because that's not priority. So yes, it's a pain problem, but is it a priority pain problem? And that's why in the problem discovery process, I make sure that I teach on how to get to the root cause, right? In my startup school, how to get into the root cause. And then the next one is switching incentive or switching cost. So if you're in a space where there are other people who are also trying to solve this problem, so that means you have other options. The incentive for a user to leave what they're currently doing to yours has to be higher. Like there has to be more to the table that you're bringing than all these other people. And so when the cost of switching is high, you need to provide more incentive. And that's why you see a lot of all these platforms are in homogeneous space. They offer things like freemium because you're trying to provide the reason why this person should leave what they're currently using for you. So you give them opportunity to have a taste of it. Then when they have a taste of it, they will be willing to now switch, right? So look at that space and see, okay, do I need to provide a switching incentive? And is there a switching cost for the user? So if it's a B2B space, an enterprise space, you're trying to bring up an enterprise solution, there's a very high chance that the switching cost is high because at the moment they have an already existing solution that they're using. It's probably not just doing, all right, but they're fine. Why? Because it takes a lot to be able to have this, solution, installed across maybe 50 countries or 20 countries and 20 states and 5,000 employees. So you don't just come to them telling them, oh, you want to good. You have to provide an incentive for them to actually come on board your platform. Hence that whole freemium model that you see people using. Next is the necessity of the service to the stakeholder. Basically, is this a need to them? Is it a need? So there's one level of knowing if it's a priority. There's also knowing if it's a real need. Is it when you think about the need level, is it there? Or is it just something you came up with because you're trying to build a startup? Another thing you need to think about is the future value of the user's activity or the user relationship. You even see that with Uber, where for the drivers, they don't charge the drivers, but they charge the users. Why? Because the future value of the drivers on their platform is more. If the drivers don't exist, the users will not use their platform. So they will use every means possible to attract the drivers to come on board because the future value of those drivers are way more in that sense, right? Think about Facebook as well. The future value of us on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter is way more. So they will not charge us to come on their platform, but they'll charge the ad managers. So not the ad managers, but basically those who actually put out, they will charge them, but they will not charge us because the user generated content is important for the other side. So hence the business model. So okay, what's the future value for each of these stakeholders? Who do I need to get on board for free. I don't have to stress. I'll just invest into getting them because I know that the value I'm going to get is more. There's a network effect happening here, right? Network, the more of these guys I have, the more the company is able to grow. Another thing I want to think about is cost. Where the cost is, what's the frequency of its appearance? What's the frequency of the appearance? And then a very important part is the price sensitivity. Price sensitivity, right? So if you think about different stakeholders and looking at them and knowing, okay, which one will easily change the price? If there's a change in prices to affect them big time. Think about drivers and Uber in the country of Nigeria. I think in recent times with the fuel scarcity, and then there was not the removal of the subsidies, so prices went up. That adjustment in price, affected both parties. And guess what? A new player came to the market called, I think they're called InDrive or Rider, something like that. You don't have to talk about price. Set your own price and then the driver accepts or not, as compared to the other business model that Uber and Bolt were using, which is price per route, per distance, and all of that. So they're solving the same problem, but their business model is different. Why? Because they have recognized as a price sensitivity issue, with the users. All right. And they've seen that this is a part of the problem that has not been addressed. So we'll address that problem and introduce ourselves into the market and still be able to play in the same space as the big guys. Why? Because of answering the question of who are the stakeholders and what is value to them. So yes, there is value in terms of getting from point A to point B. There's also the other part of value, which is price point. Price point. So with this, I've come to the end of this session. Next slide. We've captured all the 5 questions. Next slide, please. We've captured all the five questions, right? Yeah. So maybe we should just look at quickly go over Uber's value exchange chart to the thing that's behind. Yes. So you see that there is a value exchange between Uber and the user, right? You can see what is going from the user to Uber and from can you hear me? And from the user to Uber and Uber to the user. Same thing with the drivers as well. Same thing with drivers. So you want to be able to define that. You want to be able to define that. So with that said, I think we've come to the end of today's class. I think that's all I have. Next slide. I think that's everything actually. So thank you so much. Next slide, please. I think there's something I need to point out before. Next slide. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah. So one of the things I want you to take away from here is that you need to think about value exchange when designing business models, right? Think about value exchange. If out of everything I've said, think about those 5 questions in the value exchange chart. All right, so I'll just take 1 or 2 questions. Yeah. Next slide, please. Next slide. Pascal, next slide, please. Yeah. Okay. So, any questions? Are there any questions? Okay. So I'll take it that there are no questions. And yeah, Pascal, thank you.
Can you hear me?
Is that Pascal?
Haruna, you can ask your question.
Okay. I was asking if I'm audible.
Yeah, you can go on.
Now, I'm Shaban Haruna. I'm trying to confirm if you can hear me so I can ask.
Yes, I
Can
can
you
hear
hear
Okay,
you.
okay,
Chisom?
Yes, I can.
okay. So my question, okay, my question is, so basically, so why is it echoing? Okay, so um, we basically, what I want to find out is how can budding startup founders like us find the necessary backing, because those that have raised beyond pre-seed are those that have, they find themselves in some sort of supportive community. They are familiar with the VC, they are familiar with mentors, they're familiar with, so those of us that are still at pre-seed and have not raised, I'm asking how people can find that, how we can get access to that kind of support. If that's something your startup school offers, how do we get access to being investor ready?
Okay, so this is definitely not within the context of today's session. Um, so but how do you get investor ready, right? I think the first thing you want to think about as founders is it's not just about think about it in the shoes of the investor, right? Think about this from in the shoes of the investor. The investor has a goal. They're given a sum of money with a target and a time frame, and their goal is to see how they can get the return on investment like times 30 or more of what they've invested in. So I invest $1 million, I should be able to get $90 million, $900 million. And so that means they'll be looking for where they can put in their money to get that kind of return. So there are a couple of things they will look out for. Is it a big market? Can this founder actually solve the problem? Is it a big problem? How many people actually have that problem? But regardless of what it is, there's a risk factor. And the risk is no matter the number of investments they make, they know that only very few actually become successful to the point of bringing back return to the investors that they have given, that have collected their money from, that they have collected their money from. So take for example Plug and Pay. When they first started, they had $2 million. They invested in 90 startups, but only 4 became successful. Right. So there is that huge risk. So for them, they have to be very calculated about it. It's not their money, it's other people's money. It is not their personal funds. Most of them is not their personal funds. I mean, with their personal funds, they become angel investors. But a VC fund is not their money. So first thing you need to do is think about it from their own perspective. Try and see things through their eyes, which is why, in the startup school, there's the graduate program of the startup school where we now dive deep into understanding how investors think and how to talk to them, right? It's a whole class on its own, right? So you need to come from that angle, because then you will now be investor ready, because you would sort of prepare yourself for that conversation. Then there's also the other side of, are you building to be investor ready? Are you building to raise funds, or are you building to actually solve a problem? Because if you're building to primarily solve a problem, like we've seen across board, right? You need to understand that when you build something that actually works, you become attractive. There's something I've seen across all these different founders and stories that I've interacted with, which is there's that phase where the startup is trying to look for funding. They're trying very hard. Calendly spoke to over 100 investors and got no's. Didn't get a single investment. What's the name of this other one that became Remita? One popular fintech, one of the old fintech companies. They spoke to over 400. I think they only got like 4 to say yes. So there's that point where the founder is chasing funds, and there's also another phase in the journey where the investors are chasing the founder. did a I did a podcast or an article on the story of, was it LinkedIn? No, it was not LinkedIn. It was Linda.com. But there was this. I'm trying to remember the name, but it's across board. There's always that place where you're doing something that really works, and investors are trying to get your attention. They are bringing money. Please come and take my money. Now, in that situation, you're the one defining the terms. Now, you need to understand that when you're getting in the table with an investor, there are terms they're going to agree on. You need to understand what those terms are. It's not just about collecting money, which is one of the things people sign away their destiny in quotes, in quotes, in quotes, because they don't understand what's on the term sheet. So they end up getting a bad person on their table, but they're just collecting for the money. Do you know what? Watch out for season 6. I have a couple of founders who have this experience. We're gonna talk about their story in the season, so that you can actually get the two sides of the story and know how to make that decision. Yes, money is out there for investment, but you need to know what you're getting into. Because yes, you take on the money. Remember, they have a goal. They are going to get you to fulfill that goal. Basically, you're going to build to fulfill that goal. Scale is important. How big can this become? Can this be a $1 billion company? That's what they're thinking about. So you need to be able to start thinking that way from day one if you want to get VC investment, right? So I've said a lot of things, but one thing you need to recognize is to get investor ready, you need to know what's important to the investor, what's priority to them, what their goal is, and then now build or tailor your communication in that mind. And yes, and then there's the other side of being attracted to them by solving a real problem, building a sustainable business model, and then being able to catch their attention and be willing to drop money for to give in. Yeah. So how do you answer the right questions from your customers? That's a whole conversation. I really cannot answer that question in this class. I believe that the program has a part focused on customer pain points and things like that. So that would be the best point. But this is something that I spent like 2 hours teaching at the startup school. So I'm not sure there's a way I can summarize it in 1 minute. So I think just participate in the class that the Aspire Hub has for you. All right, so I think that will be all. I'll hand over to Pascal now. Pascal.
Hello, yeah, I can hear you, Chisom. Hello, can you hear me? Hello. Hello, can you hear me? Hi, Chisom, can you hear me? Guys, if you can hear me, please can you drop a comment in the comment section, please? Guys, can you hear me? Owen, Shaban, can you hear me? Network. So no one can hear me. Shaban, Owen, can you guys hear me? If you can hear me, please indicate. Okay, Giyani. So I think this is the network. Okay, so I think we are going to give her a few minutes to join. Perhaps it's a network. So let's give Chisum some. Okay, she's joining. Hi, Chisum, can you hear me now? Hello.
Yes, I can. I can.
Okay,
I
okay. I
can. I
think
can
you were
hear you.
handling the question.
Yeah, I've answered all the questions.
Hello. Hello, Chisum. Are you done with the question? Hello. So, guys, please, if you have any other question, drop them in the comment section now. You have a minute to do that. We are rounding up right now. Chisom, I'm not sure whether you were handling a question. Okay, 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 she's done. So, guys, if you have any other question, please drop it in your group and then we forward it to Chisom. If you have any other question for Chisom, you can send them to me on the group. I'll forward to her. So, thank you very much, Cynthia Chisom, for creating out your time to share knowledge, insights, and resources for our startups. And thank you, everyone, for joining in today. Um, we look forward to having you guys in the next session on, I think, on Wednesday. Thank you and have a great weekend and happy Independence Day in advance. Bye, everyone.